This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 377 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend and brother, our other host, Liam. Liam, we have decided to once again take a trip to the future.
The future, Cal?
That's right, Liam. 50 years from now, whenever now is, or the year 2049, or the year 2039, whichever your preferred modem of time capture in the DCAU is, whatever it is. That's right, we are once again here for the rest of the next couple of weeks at least, settled in the future of the DCAU with some Batman Beyond and the Zeta Project reviews. Liam, this week is a historical episode for multiple different reasons. It is historical because it's a big one for the podcast. It's important because it's a big one for the show. It's a big one for the DCAU in a lot of ways. It was directly affected by real life history here in the United States of America. And it's an important one here as we finally wrap up at least the new reviews of episodes here of Batman Beyond with what is ultimately, as we'll talk to here, in maybe not originally intended to be, but ended up being the series finale of Batman Beyond.
Yeah, so that's one of the funny things about this that we'll get into, the production woes that affected it. But yes, here we are to talk about the final ever, at least the final one to air. And I guess, I mean, even though it wasn't technically the final one in production order, it took the longest to produce, I guess. So it still kind of is. But regardless, this is the 52nd episode to air of Batman Beyond, the final original Batman Beyond episode to talk about, that being Unmasked.
That's right, Liam, and we'll get into a little bit about the history of this episode, and then, of course, dive into our own IMDb synopsis for this week's episode. But before we do, we'll, of course, tell the fine folks at home the best way to support the podcast, and that is by the fine folks at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review, who sponsor this week's official IMDb synopsis. That's right, buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review. The best way to support the DCAU Review podcast is to head over there and check out the different options that we offer there. If you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast, you know what? Maybe you want to celebrate us wrapping up Batman Beyond. It is a momentous occasion here. We're wrapping only the second series ever in the history of our show here with a final review here. Probably not going to be the last time we look at Batman Beyond for the entire podcast's existence. But hey, for now, this is the last time that we can say this is a new review of an episode of Batman Beyond. So, hey, you want to celebrate that? Maybe become a one-time supporter over at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review. Or, hey, maybe you want to keep us going here even further to encourage us to come back and review some of those early episodes of Batman Beyond that you want us to go through with a finer tooth comb. Maybe you want to become a monthly supporter of the podcast. Well, we have 3 different levels for you to join us at that monthly support level. All of them come with some really neat perks, of course, but our top tier, Super Friend tier, is the one that comes with all the perks, plus one special bonus perk, that being the option to ask us a question each and every week and hear your answer right here on the podcast as we discuss the episode and answer your question about whatever episode we're reviewing that week. So if you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast, if you want to become a monthly supporter of the podcast, either way, we need you to head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review and please support the podcast today.
Absolutely. So this is the synopsis for Unmasked, which is written by Hilary Bader, directed by Kyung-Won Lim, with music by Christopher Carter and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. The final Batman Beyond IMDb synopsis. Terry explains to Max why he needs a secret identity by telling the story of the trouble caused when he revealed it to a small boy who is then kidnapped by Cobra to interrogate him.
Nope. Poor sentence structure. Oh,
Oh, terrible. I mean, they're mixing tenses.
we had to
He
have one long
revealed
one-line
it who
sentence.
is then. Yeah, it's bad grammatical structure and barely coherent. CS after class, to say the least.
For sure. You'll notice, Liam, I did not mention the air date for this episode because I think it's interesting that we actually talk about this. So, the actual air date for this episode is December the 18th, 2001, and it was on the Cartoon Network. And if you're not quite familiar with the story here, you're saying, wait a second, why did an episode of Batman Beyond, especially the finale, debut on the Cartoon Network of all places? And well, there's a little bit of a story to that. So, of course, as I mentioned, December the 18th, 2001. So, this episode was originally slated to be shown on September the 14th, 2001. And you don't really have to be a historian to know what happened that prior week there in September of 2001. Of course, 9/11 happened, the attacks on the United States, the Twin Towers in New York, the Pentagon, and the plane in Pennsylvania. Of course, that all happened on September the 11th. This episode is scheduled to debut on September the 14th, and a lot of people were very sensitive about the idea of violence being shown on television during that time. Obviously, we have a national tragedy that is occurring in real time for a lot of people. Liam, I've heard people tell stories about how they watched the coverage of like the towers burning in their classrooms on television. So like
Mm-hmm.
this is real life stuff, real life in real time trauma that children are being exposed to. So it kind of makes sense that maybe studio executives and people that were in charge of networks were like, hey, let's not show an episode where a building gets set on fire and there's a child on the roof who needs to be rescued by Batman, as we'll soon learn here. So this one, I can't exactly chalk it up to it being somebody overzealous. It kind of makes sense to me in this case, at least, why that might be one of the reasons why this was moved off of its original air date. But it sounds like there was also some other things that contributed to the production, maybe, and that also guided this off of that original air date and found it ended up debuting on cable 3 months later.
Yeah, definitely a strange time for media. It's not certainly not the first or last time that real life tragedies affected fictional, the fictional world, whether it was 9/11 or the Columbine or stuff like that. There's a lot of historical precedent for things getting edited or taken off the air or whatever due to a last minute decision being made for something that had happened in the real world. So yeah, it's fun that is, and not to make light of the real life tragedy parts of this, but like, gosh, thank God that like there's something interesting to talk about with this episode, because as we'll get to the episode, not a little spoiler alert, episode itself not that interesting. So the fact that all of this, like the production woes and the real life circumstances of why this was delayed, probably more interesting than the episode itself.
Well, why don't we kick things off here and talk about our synopsis here, and then we'll get into our discussion of the plot and see if we agree with that assessment. We will kick things off, Liam, as you mentioned. Also, I guess one last comment. This, unlike some of our other shows that ended up following up with this show, our Justice Leagues Unlimited, this one doesn't. There's no reason for this to feel like a finale of any kind. It wasn't written to be a show finale. It's just another episode. So you wouldn't know if you played this first or third or 52nd. It really doesn't make a difference because it doesn't really feel like that this is a finale, so to speak. So that's just a fun little trivia bit there. But let's get into our plot synopsis. What do you say? As we open things up here, Liam, we are at Hamilton Hill High, where we see Terry meeting up with with his good friend Max. Max is chiding him a little bit about him being late and having to cover for him. She makes a comment about whether or not it was a tree root man, I think she says, or something like that, mocking him, of course, for him being Batman and the ridiculousness of the villains that he seems to stop. Terry assures her this time it actually was an actual errand that he has to run for Bruce, and that he had to drive him someplace, which sometimes we forget that that's what the cover story is for Terry hanging out with Bruce all the time, is that he's his gopher. So yeah, that makes sense. Max notes that unfortunately, though, Terry, regardless of why he's late, has once again left Dana in the lurch, and she's decided that she's kind of done with it at this point, and left him. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the end of their relationship, but at least in this case, she got tired of waiting and left him. She should have left him a long time ago. Yeah, should have left him a long time.
Hi, Max. Sorry I'm late.
What new threat was it this time? Root rot man?
Oh, this time it really was Mr. Wayne. He needed a ride. He's back again. Where's Dana?
She got tired of waiting for you. Sounds like an old song, doesn't it?
Well, if it isn't Mr. School Spirit.
Don't worry, McGinnis. Batman filled in for you.
Yeah. What was that about?
I, made a little joke.
What kind of little joke?
Just something about how this school sees more of Batman than it does of you. I know, it wasn't that funny.
Max,
I'm sorry, okay?
you can't even joke about this, understand?
It just slipped out.
Dana deserves better. Hashtag. And Terry is taken aback, mentioning that he can't believe after everything that happened that she would assume that that would be the right thing. He mentions the young Diaz kid and it being all over the web as to what he's referencing. Apparently, Max has better things to do than to spend online time in on whatever the DCAU equivalent to Reddit is, and I just gotta say, good for her. For her not knowing the lore of this story, it sounds just like gossip and garbage that leaked out. So good for her. Good for her for having a life outside of just surfing the internet all day. Great job, Max. Big fan of that. But she clearly is at least curious as to what it is that Terry references now that he's brought it up. So it's story time with Terry at this point. So Terry sits her down and begins to tell the tale of how he revealed his secret identity to a young boy and put him in harm's way inadvertently. So we flash back to a community picnic that is happening, and let me just say this, Liam. The most Karen of all Karens is there at the picnic, shaming another mom because her young boy is an introvert and likes to play with action figures.
There was this kid, Miguel Diaz, around the same age as my brother. He was gonzo about that new action toy, Soldier Sam.
It's all over for you, Dr. Darkblood. And just how do you plan to stop me? With this. And this.
Shouldn't he be playing?
He is playing.
I mean with the other children.
Miguel! Miguel! Why don't you give Soldier Sam a rest and go play with the other boys?
But, Mom...
Come on, you've been doing that all day. Time for something else.
Such aggressive behavior.
This poor boy, he just wants to play with his action figure Soldier Sam, and his mom unfortunately is peer pressured and made to think that there's something wrong with him because he doesn't want to go play with the other kids. She pressures him to go play with the other kids and put his action figures down. He eventually does. He walks over, but once he gets a look at the rambunctious nature of the other children and kind of seemingly is a bit of an outcast, he decides he's going to continue playing with his Soldier Sam figures. Good choice. Good choice, Miguel Diaz. So young Miguel runs off and ascends to the top of a building, I guess, with his, or is it supposed to be like a playground? I don't know what it is. It's a very tall structure that has like a little set of stairs that go up to the roof. So I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be and why it's in the middle of this park and why the stairs aren't blocked off, preventing somebody from accessing the roof, especially a young child in the middle of the night. But sure. Miguel climbs to the top of the roof, and then we We flash to Terry, who's in the bat suit, and the agents of Cobra. Of course, those Cobra guys are back, and they are robbing a bank. Of course, though, they have been interrupted. We greet them mid interruption from Batman, who is foiling their plans.
Meanwhile, way across town, the Cobra Gang was playing its own games. They'd just broken into a credit reserve, hoping to make a fast withdrawal. There was just one problem.
It's Batman! He was waiting for us! But how?
Then he decides to take off in the Batmobile. Batman does, after them. So there begins a bit of a chase sequence. There's a dogfight that incurs where the Cobra agents decide to fire 2 missiles at him. They miss the Batmobile, and Batman continues his pursuit of the Cobra agents. But those 2 missiles have to go someplace, and wouldn't you know it, nuns and dynamite. They hit the building or the structure that Miguel is playing on top of, and it begins immediately, it catches fire, begins collapsing. Batman notices and tells Bruce over the radio that he's going to go save the kid. And that's where we get ultimately where Terry had to make a choice as he's on the roof trying to save Miguel, who is running away from him, clearly in terror of this man in a bat suit. Despite his pleas with young Miguel, Miguel does not want to grab on to Terry and let him save him.
It's all right. Don't be afraid.
Get away from me!
Hey, I'm one of the good guys.
You don't look like a good guy.
It's just to scare the bad guys, really. Come on, you have to trust me. Oh, slag it. Look.
You're just a guy.
Yeah, a guy who doesn't want to see you barbecue. Reach. You can do it.
Miguel! Mom!
As Batman flies off and Miguel is saved. However, that victory is short-lived as we see. We cut back to Terry and Max. Max says, hey, well, you know what? My point is proven. You revealed your identity to somebody and it served good and everything's great and everything's fine. But Terry's silence and look at her clearly makes it clear to her that everything, in fact, is not okay as he begins resuming the story. But we don't pick up right away with Terry. We head back to Cobra headquarters, where our Cobra agents who were foiled in the robbery but were able to escape are reunited with one of their Cobra leaders. And it's here we learn a very, very important tool that's going to be used in this episode's finale here, because we have to have something that's going to fit here. How on earth could you extract the information from the young boy that, how could that be a liability, Liam? That somebody knowing Terry looks like Terry, he's just a young teenage kid. How is anyone in a city of probably millions going to pick this kid out of a lineup, especially from a 6 or 7 year old boy? It's impossible. How could someone describe him perfectly like that?
Well, thankfully, we have magic or science, depending on your interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Although, as we'll get to, maybe there's precedent for this sort of thing. But yes, as we cut back to Cobra headquarters, we see them sort of debriefing the leader guy. There's always like one Cobra guy who's in everybody else is in those green scaly Cobra grunt suits. And then there's the one guy who's in an orange suit and he's wearing a Julius Caesar toga, sassy little short skirt toga.
Mm-hmm.
So that guy, who we assume is in charge, I guess, is talking about they're discussing, sort of debriefing, how could Batman have possibly known about this heist that they were trying to pull off? Someone must have talked. And so they put this device on one of the soldiers' heads. and it perfectly recalls and visualizes, which is important for the episode, memories on the screen. You put this, it's like a VR headset, you put it on, and then you can see the other person's memories. So we see a memory of that Cobra agent apparently making a phone call to his brother, who is not in Cobra, his non-Cobra brother, who is telling him to pull all of his money out of the bank before things get get hairy, before Cobra makes their move. So the Cobra leader, of course, very frustrated by this, and despite the grunt Cobra grunts please, they are thrown into a pit of snake, a literal pit of cobras. It's not one for subtlety, these Cobra boys.
Nope.
So because of that, so we've established there's a mind reading device, and that there's now a way. And right after they finish feeding that guy to the cobras, I don't think cobras eat humans, but I guess they'll bite him to death, and then they just pick up the body later. Anyway, there happens to be a news report. One of the other Cobra agents runs in saying, "Check this out, boss," and it's an interview with this young boy Miguel, who is talking about how Batman's just like us, and that he's seen him under his mask, and he knows he's just a regular guy. So the Cobra leader decides that now it's time to that they can track down this kid, and then they'll track down the true identity of Batman, which I guess is important to them to know. I don't know. I mean, I guess he's gonna show up and try to stop you anyway. But I guess you could blackmail him, as we'll get to. But yes, so that's their plan here. As Max and Terry continue discussing things, Max is a little bit surprised that Miguel would actually reveal that, and she then asks if Bruce had seen the news and what he did, and then we cut back to the flashback where Bruce is just really reaming Terry out. He's so frustrated.
So the kid got on TV and told the whole world how he saw you without your mask?
Yup.
And the old man, he saw the report?
How could he not? It was the news bite of the day.
What were you thinking?
He would have died. There was no other way.
There's always another way.
I don't see what you're so worried about. He's probably forgotten what I look like by now.
That doesn't matter. What matters is that other people think he knows what you look like. You've made that little boy a target.
And so Terry needs to keep a lookout on poor Miguel. And as Terry is sort of watching him, he's being taken home by I don't know, is it the teacher, a social worker, whoever this is.
Yeah, no, I think it's an instrument teacher.
They do say it's about practice. Yeah. So he's coming back from practice with his teacher. His teacher walks him pretty close to his house before saying goodbye as Terry watches on. Terry's very whiny about this. He doesn't like being on this assignment. He's got a life. He's got a girlfriend who he doesn't deserve, and he's complaining to Bruce. So Bruce finally acquiesces and says that he'll call Barbara and ask for the cops to come keep an eye on Miguel at the apartment where he lives. But just before Miguel can get safely inside the apartment, we see him a little bit distracted by one of his toys that was left down on the ground, and then three Cobra agents show up to attack him and take him in, and they're quite menacing. And thankfully, Batman was still watching and comes down onto the scene, and we have some fisticuffs here as Terry is handling his own, but he is a bit overwhelmed. Eventually, he is able to disable all three of the Cobra agents and save Miguel from one of the crashing motorbikes that explodes nearby. So all's well that ends well, and thankfully, right then the police get there, who tell Batman that they're there to relieve him. And Batman asks if the commissioner filled him in, and they say yes. So Batman says, "Good enough for me," and hands Miguel over to them as they promise that they're going to take the kid in and take him to protective custody with his mom, and everything will be hunky dory from there.
Terry, are you there?
I'm here. Cobra just tried to make a move on Miguel.
Everything okay?
Yeah. Cops were just here sweeping up. Thanks for arranging things with the commish.
I didn't. She was in a meeting. I couldn't get through. Terry.
I think I just handed Miguel over to Cobra.
At that point, Bruce reveals, I couldn't actually get in touch with her, and she was in a meeting. So, who the heck were those cops that just that Terry just turned Miguel over to? So we cut back to Miguel in the back of the police car, smiling, playing with his little action figure. We see a menacing smile on the face of the cop as we realize that they are also working for Cobra. So this is where Terry's realized his big mistake. We see him sort of searching pretty desperately over the city as he kind of beats himself up. You know, he can't believe that he thought these were real cops, but they looked so legit. And they even had the police cars, which Bruce points out, hey, they were probably stolen. And if that's the case, then we just need the vehicle number, and then we can probably track those down because they all have tracking devices. Thankfully, isn't that convenient for what needs to happen in the plot? Mm-hmm. So while Terry does not have perfect memory recall and cannot recall the numbers on the sides of the vehicles himself, thankfully the Batmobile was parked in its like. Did we know the Batmobile had like a camouflage mode? It's like a hologram thing.
Good question.
But it was parked on the.
Yeah, I don't know if that showed up before.
Yeah, like the original Batmobile had like dumpster mode. Remember that? And I don't remember what episode that is, but this one is more of a holographic thing. So he's upgraded the tech a bit here. But yes, here we have Bruce. Thankfully, that camera, which is just constantly recording, constantly surveilling the people of Gotham City. No real world parallels there. At that point. They're able to capture an image of the beating police car, and they see the numbers. So Terry is back on the hunt as we see Miguel scared and alone, clutching his Soldier Sam action figure as he comes face to face with the leader of Cobra, or at least of this sect of Cobra, who tells him they're kind of playing good cop at this point. They say, hey, we're not trying to scare you. We just need you to put this device on your head and remember what Batman looks like, and then we'll let you go. And I mean, if you can't trust the leader of Cobra, who can you trust?
That's right, Liam. You know, they say that's what many people say. I hear many people have said that. If you can't trust the leader of Cobra, is that straight from the Cobra book of propaganda? I'm wondering, because I don't know where else I would have heard that from, because who else can you trust if not the leader of Cobra? Oh, but anyway, so they put the device on after some coaxing, as you mentioned. They do threaten to break his action figure. I don't know if you mentioned that, but they threaten to break his action figure also if he doesn't cooperate. So it's, yeah, like you said, good cop, bad cop. So at this point, Miguel begins to sit down, and the leader of the Cobra begins coaching him through the memory, talking about the burning building, and we start to see the screen form some images. We get crystal clear images. This is the other thing I don't understand. When we saw the other Cobra guy's memory, it was literally just a guy in the shadows. Like, at no point did we get like full clear memories. We just saw somebody in the shadows on a cell phone. It was supposed to be our guy, obviously, but it's not like we saw him seeing himself. It's just kind of like a shadowy figure. Here we have like perfect crystal clear HD replay of Miguel's memories here, and we see Batman reaching his hand out. We see Batman taking his mask off, but things begin to get a little fuzzy.
And as he got closer, he took off his mask, didn't he?
Uh-huh.
And what did he look like?
What's wrong?
He's losing his concentration. Think. What did he look like?
I want to go home. Can I go home?
No. Here, relax. All I want is for you to concentrate as hard as you can on his face. You can remember his face, can't you? Better. Much better. That's it.
we begin to see the warbly and distorted image begin to form, and it begins to depixelize, and our Cobra agents are very satisfied. We don't, as the viewer, don't see what the image looks like, but we see that they're happy. They have an image. They discuss among themselves as to who the person is. One guy says he doesn't recognize him at all. The other guy says he knows the face. He's seen him before, but can't place him. The Cobra leader said, none the matter. They're going to plug it into the database, and they're going to find out just who he is and send the information out. So at that point, we hear some crying out in the hallway, but we have our leaders who, what do you know, Liam? They double cross. They decide they're not going to hold up their end of the bargain. They lead young Miguel over to the Cobra pit and threaten to throw him down. But just before the man dressed up as a GCPD officer throws Miguel into the pit, we hear some loud crash and bangs and a guy fly through the metal door. It's a Cobra agent. He's knocked out. He's all tied up. Then we see another guy get thrown through the door also, and coming in after him, it is in fact Batman. Batman's there to save the day. He knocks out the GCPD impersonator and saves Miguel from being thrown into the Cobra pit. We see the last guy that tried to kidnap Miguel in the scene beforehand that Batman took care of. He's back, and this time he's got two giant swords on his hands that are also electrified for some reason. So it's Batman versus the guy with the swords for hands. And Batman is able to quickly dispose of that guy as well, who almost falls into the Cobra pit himself. But he gets knocked out, and then as Batman turns back around, the Cobra leader has Miguel in his possession and is threatening Batman.
Step away from the door. We're leaving.
No, you're not.
Hey!
What's so funny?
I might have lost this one battle, but you've lost the war. See, we know what you look like under that mask. All of us do.
What?
You can thank your little friend here. I pulled a perfect image of your face from his memory, and I've uploaded it to every Cobra site in the world. It'll only be a matter of time before my colleagues find out your name.
Gotham Police, open up!
I've done well. I'll be remembered.
Don't!
And now that his job is done, he's going to live, he's going to become a legend in the Cobra community. He decides to kill himself. He jumps into the pit of vipers himself. Batman tries to shield young Miguel from the horrors that he's about to witness, and thankfully there's no sound. He let the snakes bite him, and it didn't feel any pain in the process, I guess. But Batman then looks back at the computer and notices that the image of the unmasked Batman is in fact there, but he gives it a big old smile as we look up and see that the image is not in fact of Terry's face. It is in fact the action figure that we saw before, Soldier Sam, is the actual face that Miguel remembered as the unmasked Batman. So we cut back to Terry and Max says that Miguel must have just swapped Terry's face for his other hero's face, and Terry says that's probably true. Max asks Terry, though, how he can be sure that Miguel will not remember his face at any point. And wouldn't you know it, they're sitting on a soccer field, and a young boy comes up and kicks the soccer ball. Terry hands it back to him and runs away. And it's none other than Miguel, who goes back to play. Terry assures her that he sees Miguel quite often here at the soccer field, and he's yet to recognize him, so that's why he feels so assured. We then cut back to Miguel, who's running back to play with some of his friends. Look, he's got friends now, all because of this incident with Batman, I guess. Either that or his mom decided to just put him on a rec team and socialize him that way. But he's back playing soccer, but before he goes back to his friends, he gives one knowing look over the shoulder back at Terry and Max as they walk away, leading us to believe that maybe, in fact, Miguel does know the secret identity of the Batman as we fade to black for this week's episode. All right, Liam.
Absolutely.
So let us talk about this week's episode, shall we? It is yeah, it's an episode. It certainly is an episode. There are things that happen in the episode, and there are reasons that those things happen, and there are resolutions to the things that happen in the episode.
Yeah, so like it's fine. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. That's the headline here. I think it's tough because as you pointed out, like if this had just aired as one of the episodes of Batman Beyond, I don't know if I would feel as harshly about this as I do. Um, because there's nothing inherently wrong with it. But it's also just not that interesting. And then I think the added bit, as we talked about, the real world implications of it being the final ever episode of Batman Beyond to air, you're like, yeah, this is not one of the stronger entries, unfortunately. It's funny. I was one of the featurettes that I think it was on the original DVD release of this season, and then also on the Blu-ray version of this. They have like a little round table thing with Alan Burnett, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and Glenn Murakami. And one of the things they point out is that at that point they didn't really. That's not really how you didn't really do like a series finale in a traditional sense because you didn't really get a cancellation notice the way that like broadcast network TV primetime shows do. It's like you're contracted to make your however many episodes, and then when that episode order is up, either you get picked up for more or you don't. So they just kind of making their show, and then they never got like an official word of like this will be your last season. They just made their 13 episodes, and that was kind of the end of it. And it's funny because Bruce Timm said that because of this and because he kind of saw the fan anticipation slash disappointment with this final episode when people found out it was finally going to air on Cartoon Network, and then it ended up being this kind of run-of-the-mill episode, he kind of used this as like a reason why once they got to Justice League and JLU they started to do more like dramatic season finale type episodes when they were getting to the end of the episode orders, because they wanted it to have a bit more finality and a bit more impact. So, I mean, I guess this is kind of important because, hey, who knows if we would have gotten Starcrossed or some of those other big finale episodes if it weren't for this one being kind of a dull thud of a way to end a series.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's got an unfair, like you said, it's just unfair expectations for what the finale of a series should look like. And they kind of did it, I guess, with Superman, right? Like you have Legacy that ended up being the finale for that one, which doesn't feel it's not satisfactory in a way where our characters have a strong resolution to them and there are a lot of unanswered questions by the end of the episode, but it does feel like this big bombastic event that is kind of worthy of a finale for a series. Batman the animated series, the new Batman Adventures, yeah, they kind of follow the Batman Beyond route, right? There's not a real big bombastic finish there, but then as you mentioned, Justice League Unlimited, there's certainly more of these large important tentpole events that end up kind of wrapping things up there. So, yeah, I feel bad for the episode in that way. That being said, even outside of that, it does not feel, it just kind of feels like a interesting idea, I guess. Um, it's not quite, I don't want to just completely draw the comparison, but I had a hard time not drawing it. Maybe it's just because it kind of revolves around a kid as the main one of the main protagonists of the episode. Is that it's kind of like Batman Beyond's I've got Batman in my basement in a sort of way. Like there's a big linchpin part of your plot that hinges on this child and their memory and all of that. And obviously, like I said, Batman is and I've got Batman in my basement. Batman is incapacitated for the majority of it, and you follow the kids around. Where this is, Batman is still the main focus for the episode and him pursuing and trying to figure out how he's going to protect Miguel. But there's a little bit of that. There's a child in danger. You're supposed to identify because of the audience with the child more than Batman. Something that I think was interesting that felt like they were going down one pathway here is Bruce absolutely losing it on Terry with the fact that he decided to reveal his identity. And I feel like that could have been explored a little more because he is just relentlessly just reaming Terry out in that scene once he finds out. And I think it feels almost unjustified and unfair in a way for where we are in this series at this point for him to be that unfair to Terry. It felt like we'd kind of grown to a point where there was at least some mutual respect there, and he wasn't always kind of, this feels very early on in their relationship versus where we are here in season 3 in a way to me. So I feel like that felt a little bit jarring, but still, if you're gonna do that, I think that's interesting, but there should have been some either follow up to that. There should be some like a payoff to it or a better understanding of just why Bruce absolutely lost his crap on Terry in that sequence because he was unrelenting.
Yeah, like I mean, obviously Bruce has a heart for children who are victims of tragedy. I think it's fair to say. So yeah, that being an element here is probably the most interesting, might be the most interesting thing about the whole episode, honestly. Because yeah, Bruce's sort of horror at the idea that Terry would have been so careless, even though, as Terry points out, is like this was the only way to get him. Like, is it better that he's seen my face and is alive? Which, I mean, Terry's not wrong there, but the sort of nonchalant way of I guess that he dealt with the aftermath and with, I guess he maybe should have told Miguel, hey, don't tell anybody that you've seen my face or you'll be targeted by snake people. I don't know. But yeah, there's something interesting there. Or if the idea of if it was like the kid didn't really understand that why he was in danger, and it was like, and he's sort of treating everything like it's his action figures, like it's all just a game, and Batman's trying to like iterate to him like, no, these are real villains, these are real terrorists, that you're in actual trouble here. Or if it was like the thing of like, it almost feels like instead of, but I guess you had to have a way for Cobra to hear about it. Because my other thought was like, maybe it would have been better if it was like he's a kid and they show that he's kind of timid and doesn't have any friends in the first scene. So it's like if he's being bullied or something, and then he like in like a fit of anger announces to like a group of kids like, hey, I know who Batman is or something. And then somehow that gets to, I think the problem here is Cobra being the villain. I feel like you could have picked any other villain, but also I guess you needed somebody that would have the technology and the resources to have a magic mind reading device.
Right.
So I just think this episode's a little broken, honestly.
Yeah, it does. I feel like we're with Bruce screaming, there's always another way to like that just feels like it's like, is there, like, what does that mean? Like, and also I just feel like there should have been some resolution to that conversation at the end where either Bruce admits like, hey, I overreacted, you did the right thing, you're Batman, you're good, like to Terry, like I get it, you made the right decision, I'll eat my humble pie, even if it's in that way that like Bruce does it in 90% of the episodes where he's like begrudgingly and subtly telling Terry that like, hey, you're right and I was wrong. Then that would have been fine. Or, maybe a better explanation of why Bruce is so passionate about this. Like you said, if it's related to putting children in danger, obviously Bruce being in a situation where he experienced it, the Robins that he the Robins that he helped, their experiences through that. Sure, then have that conversation. But there should have been some resolution to that because it seems really brutal, really important in the middle of the scene, and then it just doesn't really ever get addressed. Yeah, I think broken is probably a good way to describe this. I mean, I like the resolution at the end, as far as or the cute little thing at the end where actually he actually really does know who Terry is, or maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It's a little ambiguous. Him looking at the screen kind of giving you that idea that maybe he actually does recognize Terry. I like that. That feels very like, end of an 80s kids movie or something like that, or any like Disney kids movie where it's like, okay, he's in on it, but he's actually smart enough to realize why it was important to protect Terry's identity and whatever. But yeah, for all those reasons, Liam, there are some interesting action pieces here in the middle here, some fight sequences that work out. There's a little bit of tension that you feel with once especially it's revealed that the police are not the actual police. That was a good twist. I liked that. But overall I think it just falls short for being a really interesting episode. So for all those reasons, I ended up with just giving it a 5 out of 10 for my plot. What about you?
Yeah, I went 1 point lower. I went 4 out of 10. Yeah, not so much for the logic breaks, although like I said, I think there is, I don't know if it's a logic break, but like I said, just not like I said, the way it all unfolds with like the kid on a news report and then Cobra
All the happenstance.
kidnapping, yeah, and the Cobra kidnapping him because they have this magic mind device. I don't know. Like I feel like you could have, like, I don't think you need the mind reading device. I feel like it could have just been like, I don't know, Mad Stan or somebody could have just like grabbed the kid, like some lower level threat could have just like overheard this kid like arguing with a group of friends, or the Jokers or somebody. Like it could have been any villain. Like they didn't, and then they could have just kidnapped him and like threatened him and say like, tell us who he is and whatever. Like that could have been, or maybe a whole group of different people come after the kid and it's more like, Batman, fending off a bunch of these different groups trying to save this kid or whatever. Maybe that could have been more fun. But again, I try not to rewrite a 30-year-old cartoon if I can help it. But yeah, I just didn't find it particularly interesting. The element of it being a flashback story, I think, is also odd. But
Yeah, we don't get that used very often. I don't think we get it used at all in the majority of our, I mean, we get the flashbacks obviously here and there in Batman the Animated Series, but as far as a flashback, I'm going to tell a story, we have very few narratives from a character in our stories to tell the stories versus watching it happen kind of in real time, quote unquote. I feel like
yeah,
for a story.
yeah, and like I was trying to also figure out if this breaks continuity at all, because he meets Cobra, or he fights Cobra chronologically for the first time in, what is it? It's the Plague, the
I think so, yes.
Stalker episode, the False Face episode. So I don't, and I feel like there's a scene of like Agent Bennett and whoever explaining to Terry what Cobra is, or Bruce explained, but maybe I'm misremembering that, but maybe it's more expositional and it's more ambiguous there. But I also thought about that. I was like, the fact that they go out of their way to be like, this was before, or this was like right after I first became Batman. I was like, I don't know, I don't know. They don't do it. You know what would have been fun, since they made that again. This is my last bit of fantasy booking for this episode. Since they said this happened right after he became Batman, this would have been a good excuse to bring back Blight in a flashback episode.
Oh, good call.
And have him somehow be aware of this kid who knows who Batman is, and kidnap the kid or something. That could have been fun. But
Agreed.
alas, none of that was to be. Instead, it's a bunch of snake guys. But anyway, yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 10. All that to say, it's not the worst episode I've ever seen. Certainly, we'll be reviewing Zeta Project next week, but yeah, it'll be a long time, I think, before I would want to watch this one again, for at least for a plot. Well, not to spoil our rewatchability chat at the end, but
yeah, save it for the end.
Kind of a dull, yeah, just like I said, it's just dull. I just found it not that interesting, and the device of the magic memory machine being there is just like, well, okay.
Good segue, by the way, to the Magic Memory Machine, because that'll allow us, before we move on to animation and visuals, is to talk just briefly as to what I thought this was originally going to be tied to, in which I was like, oh, that would make this episode way more important and or interesting in some form or fashion to the DCAU, and that is, I my theory, my headcanon is that this machine, and they could have been blatantly obvious and that would have made it more interesting, but the machine that they use to read the thoughts functions a lot like that machine in The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne
Hmm.
is used to view the thoughts and memories of his victims, of Dr. Hugo Strange's victims. So I'm wondering if they didn't get their hands on similar material, or it would have been interesting if they mentioned that, I don't know, they have this gigantic web of influence across the world, that somewhere somehow they got plans to a machine from a scientist that worked in Gotham that had the ability to do that while they're giving their exposition about what the machine did. That would have given it some sort of interesting sort of tie back, at least, to the Hugo Strange character, which is like, oh, okay, well, at least we have some connection here. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not actually that way, but maybe it's headcanon for me. I think this is the same type of technology or machine, or it was maybe the Hugo Strange. I know that machine is destroyed at the end of that, or in the middle of that, the Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne episode, but maybe the plans were still around, or the science behind it was still around someplace. So it fell into the hands of Cobra at some point. Maybe Dr. Hugo Strange sold it to the original Cobra leaders and that were around during that time. Because I think, isn't the story that they've been around for centuries or something like that? So
Yeah, that sounds about right. And well, and we also know Hugo was working for Cadmus. We
right.
get him at the table in that one episode before the bad embargo snatched him away.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know that there were some plans to use him a little bit more in JLU. We know he stayed active in his field of mind manipulation and all of that. So yeah, it's possible the machine was rebuilt, or at least his research survived long enough for someone else to build something similar. So hey, that's another thing. Another thing that is way more interesting than the episode itself is that fan theory you've concocted here, Cal.
There we go. All right, Liam, let's move on to our second category of the day, which is going to be animation and visuals, as we talked about. So this episode was directed by Hyung Won Lim. Apologies if I butchered that. And the animation itself was done by Coco and Dong Yang. Hilary J. Bader, the late Hilary J. Bader, was responsible for the writing for the episode. So, we talked about it, Liam. I think it's maybe referenced by Bruce Timm in that featurette or roundtable about quote unquote production issues. And it's unclear whether he's just referring to the delay from the 9/11 stuff, but it certainly seems to be more than just the decision to pull the episode that is referenced there, as far as this production issue and whatever that was. I was not able to find specifics on what that particular production issue could have been. However, I don't know if you also noticed, but I noticed that personally, that I felt like there were a couple of scenes that the animation just seemed cut very strangely, specifically the scene where Terry decides that he's going to track the police, like the number off of the police car. Like
Mhm.
that sequence felt like it went uh like there should have been more cuts in between there. And I don't know, this is all speculation again, based on what we know from talking to people that have directed this show, about how sometimes you get shots back and they just don't look very good, or you need to cut someplace and fit something else in order to make it not stand out that there's some bad animation or something that doesn't quite look like what the director had in mind here. But there are some sequences that just, the characters are a little stiff. There's more like long shots of them talking at the camera, or like I said, in that case with the him trying to find the sequence there. It's just that, coupled with the amount of music that I feel like plays in that, feels like that there was something that maybe went wrong with that sequence that just didn't fit right, and whatever, they just kind of had to go with it at some point, as far as the animation is concerned. Um, what did you like about the episode? What stood out for you that you liked? And was there anything that stood out to you that maybe you didn't like?
Yeah, I think the imagery during the fire at the start of the episode when he's trying to save Miguel is pretty cool. Batman walking through the fire, trying to illustrate why a child would be terrified of Batman. I think they do a good job with that, and it's a cool visual in and of itself. I think that's pretty cool. Um, the I like the design of the cobra, the actual cobras in the pit, and like the background designs of the Cobra headquarters. I don't know if some of these are reused from the Curse of Cobra episode that would have been in production around this time, but I think the Cobra pit is new as far as I remember. So I think that's a fun added visual for our evil snake guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that stands out. Yeah, I don't want to be too negative. I will say the rest of the episode, yeah, the animation feels a little stiff. There's a lot of the Batmobile in this episode, and it does not look very good. I feel like it feels like a static image that's being like, it's like on a popsicle stick being like shook up and down as it moves across the screen a lot of the time. It feels like, yeah, it just doesn't feel very fluid or moving. I feel like there's so many cool shots of the Batmobile sweeping through buildings and stuff in this series, and this episode just feels a little jankier. I don't quite know. And again, maybe I was already looking for that stuff because I knew this episode had some production issues that delayed it. So maybe I was just looking for more things. There's also a shot where I think when Terry realizes that he's just turned Miguel over to the fake cops, it like pushes in. They try to do this like dramatic close up, but it feels like it's not. I don't know if they tried a different camera trick or a different animation trick, but I feel like it didn't have a lot of weight to that close up because it felt like we were literally like just pushing zoom on like a digital camera. Like the image was not, it wasn't that sort of dynamic close up that we're used to from this series, or certainly the types that we would get in BTOS and things like that. So it's just little things where it's like I've seen them do this sort of animation trick 100 times in all these shows before, but there's something just a little janky or a little slow or a little sluggish about it. And like I said, I don't know quite what it was. Also, and I think you pointed this out before we went on the air, but there are a lot of, it feels like a lot of extra cuts and quick edits during a lot of the fight sequences. So I don't know if that's an issue more on the storyboarding or on the animation itself. Again, it's a Coco Dong Yang. I think they did like, there's 52 episodes of Batman Beyond. It feels like they did like 40 of them at least. So I don't know what the issue would be here, but yeah, it did feel like there's a lot of quick cuts and edits in the action sequences here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like we said, I don't want to harp on all the bad. I think you highlighted a lot there. We both did. There were a couple of really neat sequences I liked. I did like the opening sequence, the reveal of the Cobra Gang, of them kind of doing the Batman reveal through their dialogue, talking to each other, and then Batman comes through the smoke, and we'll talk about it in music here. The musical accompaniment with it, just a really, really, really great visual. I loved that. Batman makes a couple of really cool entrances here. We have that entrance, and then later on when he throws the guy through the door and then throws the other guy through the door that's now broken, and then flies through. I thought that was a great entrance also. I think the fight sequence that he has with the one guy that has like the big the paint on his chin, in the sequence that they're trying to kidnap Miguel for the first time. I think that little duel that they have, and then following that up where it just follows like the classic movie trope of you best the bad guy one time just enough, but he comes back, and this time he's got like a bigger, badder weapon, and he's got those two like curved swords on his arms. I thought that was great. I love the sequence that Batman throws him far enough where he slides into the Cobra pit, but he hangs on at the last second with like the hook. Like he's able to hang on there, and he comes up, and Batman knocks him out again for the second straight scene. I really enjoyed that. So I think some of the fight sequences are at least interesting there, even if maybe some of the cuts don't look all that great. I would agree with you. I think the way that the sequence of Batman saving Miguel from the roof, we don't really get a lot of times where you see Terry's suit kind of bathed in a different light because he's usually fighting somebody at night. So the orange hue from the fire glow and that, I agreed with you, that was a neat and different look for how things usually look for our Batman. So I agree. I think that looks good, but unfortunately, I think we have a lot of dialogue. A lot, as you said, Batman and the Batmobile a lot. The dogfight is cool. We get a little bit of that. I think the alien ship, which is kind of looks like a TIE fighter, and they get a little bit of a dogfight, and them using the targeting system, and that always invokes some Star Wars dogfight air battles. I enjoyed that sequence as well, but overall, I think that this episode kind of just falls short in a lot of areas, and this, like I said, there's just a couple sequences that just kind of feel weird and a little janky to me. So because of that, I ended up giving it a 5 out of 10 for my animation and visuals, despite a couple of really interesting shots. What about you?
Yeah, I think I like I said, just 1 point lower, 4 out of 10. Don't think we need disagreement alarm or anything, but yeah, like I said, I just think it's just a little janky, and those cuts, certainly in that first sequence where Terry's fighting the three Cobra guys on the street. I just kept noticing, I was like, wow, there's a lot of weird like cuts to avoid, and I don't know, as we talked about, maybe that has to play into, like we talked about, violence on television coming under a microscope in the wake of, as we said, certain national tragedies. So maybe they were trying to like cut out specific impacts in a way they didn't before. But yeah, it feels like there's a lot of quick cuts right before impact, but not in the BTOS way, less implied and more just like, oh, we just cut to a new scene or completely new shot here. So it didn't feel like the fights had a lot of impact. I do really love to finish my sandwich compliment here. I'll say I do like the bit where, as they're kind of menacing poor Miguel and about to throw him into the pit, where the tied up Cobra Goon just comes Kool-Aid Manning through the wall. That's a fun bit there to as we kick off the final action sequence there. But it's kind of janky, but it did make me laugh, which is the Cobra leader still tied up, like running kind of woodenly towards the pit and diving in, and Batman doing like the Willy Wonka, like, don't stop, come back. Like he barely tries to stop him from jumping into the snake pit himself. That's kind of funny, even if it's, like I said, it felt a little janky, but it did make me laugh. So I appreciate that as well. So yeah, not the best effort of anybody involved, but certainly not the worst we've seen either.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. Christopher Carter responsible for this week's music, I believe, according to the credits. Yeah, I honestly think the highlight of this episode is the music. It's great. Like I said, that opening sequence that we get with the Cobra guys that are robbing the bank, and you kind of get some standard fare of drums and guitar and percussion, and then one of them mentions Batman being there, and you see the smoke, and Batman walks through, and you just hear the wail of the guitar, and it's the Beyond theme, and it's great as Batman is beating these guys up. Animation be damned here. We have just the best as we see our hero fighting to his own theme song, which is great. And then it comes back later on. I think it's maybe in the final sequence. Also, we get some of the Beyond theme again. And even though it felt like, to me, it felt like a sequence that we would usually get either just some of that ethereal, just kind of holding of the keys and just kind of a sound with a little bit of percussion as Terry's doing the research on the police car. I did like that piece. It stands out. It plays plays pretty long. It's a pretty significant piece that you hear there. So I enjoyed that and appreciated that musical note there. I think, some of the other stuff in between, of course, Terry fighting the Cobra guys on the street as they try and abduct Miguel. Him saving Miguel off of the burning building has some good music there as well. But yeah, I think there's some really strong pieces here led by that Beyond theme that I recognize. What did you anything that I missed, Liam, that I failed to mention that you liked, or any other points that you like to mention?
No, I think that about covers it. Definitely the Beyond theme in the fight sequences is what stood out for me. I feel like we've noted in the past we didn't get as much of that as we did with the classic Shirley Walker Batman theme in BTOS. So it's always fun when that main hero theme gets used for sure.
Yeah, so for those reasons, I ended up giving music a 7 out of 10, which maybe doesn't feel super strong, but so far the strongest score of the episode for me. What about you?
Yeah, I give it a 6 out of 10. So as the theme continues here, I'm just 1 point lower, but yeah, it was said a good solid outing from Mr. Carter.
All right, Liam, well, that will bring us home with our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice actors and actresses. Several obviously well known and recurring cast members here on this episode. We also have a couple of guest stars that you're going to recognize their names, and of course, a couple of newbies here. Let's talk about our voice cast, shall we?
Absolutely. So we do briefly have Seth Green back for one last turn as the villain is Nelson Nash, or the bully, the school jock Nelson Nash. Other than that one episode where they fight, there's really never been a time where Nelson Nash was that bad of a guy. I feel like he's just kind of a d-bag. But yeah.
Snide remarks. He kind of treats his girlfriend like trash,
I mean, he
but
did try to kill Willie Watt. I think we just figured that out.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe we buried the lead.
Yeah, but anyway, but for the most part, other than that one attempted murder or he pushed him off into the docks or whatever. But other than that one time, he hasn't done anything that bad. But yeah, nice to have him back for one last go. Playing I love that he's named Bracelet Cobra, because that's just a funny way to phrase this, but it's the very menacing Cobra guy who has like the two I guess it's not the Wolverine claws, it's the X-23 claws. Yeah. Although I think she became Wolverine later too. But anyway, the two claws with the little hooks, but they also have like the little fang on them as he menaces both Miguel and tries to menace Batman, though he's quickly overmatched and of course off screen, but stuck with his own venom and hoisted by his own petard, quite literally there. Fun little bit there. We have Teresa Saldana playing Mrs. Diaz, Miguel's mom. Not much for her to do, but she's there along with the Pat Music, who is playing both the music teacher, funny enough.
Get out of here.
And also I think she's also the mom who's like yelling at Mrs. Diaz that her kid should be playing.
The Karen. Yeah.
Yes, the Karen, the busybody is literally, I think, what she's labeled as in the episode, which is hilarious. We have Victor Rivers, who plays actually some important characters. Not so much in this show. He's just one of the guards, but of course later on would voice Hro Talik in Starcross, which is a huge role there. So, and he was also the invulnerable man in Mind Games, which unfortunately led to a sequel episode in the Zeta Project. So he loses a point for that, but that's not his fault. Just kidding. But yes, that's him there as well. Good to have him back. And then yeah, playing some of the other Cobra ops, we have Corey Burton. Shockingly, I think only doing one voice in this episode.
I only heard it once. Yeah,
he's just the Cobra grunt who called his brother that they test the machine on to tell him to pull his money out of the bank or whatever. That's his only role. Shockingly, he's not any of the other Cobra agents, unless maybe he does some of the grunts or groans in the fight scene or something, for all we know. But yeah, that's always good to have CB, one of the goats, back this week, and then back playing the main Cobra guy, even though I guess this would have to be a different guy unless we find out. So this is actually mentioned on the DCAO wiki. So Cobra One, as he's known, or Cobra Op, as he's known in this episode, main Cobra Op, um, does die. It appears at the end of this episode. As mentioned, he runs and jumps into a pit of venomous snakes. But he's also back and is voiced by the same guy in Plague and then in Zeta. Or no, he plays somebody else in Zeta. But so he's back in Plague in the same costume with the same voice actor. So is he immune to Cobra Venom? Are we creating additional lore for Cobra Leader? Or are they like clones? What's going on here? Why is this guy the same guy, even though this is a flashback?
You see, it's his brother. We had one brother guy who called his brother who wasn't in Cobra. He had to call him to warn him to get his money out of the bank. This guy had a brother who also is in Cobra, and that's why I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Right? It could just be that they broke their own continuity, as we talked about before, where we don't even know where this takes place in the timeline, other than quote early on in his time as Batman or just after becoming Batman. Does this take place before that somehow? I don't know. I think these guys wear masks and all have that like chin hair thing, and they all would look the same in the suits. So I think there's a headcanon explanation here if you want it to be. My headcanon explanation is it's his brother.
I love that. This guy also comes back in a guy who looks like him also comes back in the Static Shock episode too. Yeah. And speaking of which, Mr. Mahan is speaking of Static Shock, we've actually talked about him quite a few times because he's the voice of Edwin Alva in that show.
That's right.
He does a good job here. For all of that to say, he does a fine job here. He's menacing. He's got a good raspy villain voice. And to his credit, I didn't immediately peg that this was Edwin Alva because he has a pretty distinct, as we've talked about, the sort of Michael Douglas Wall Street accent that he does when he does Edwin Alva. So yeah, he does. Mr. Mahan does a good job as our mustache or goatee twirling baddie this week.
Yeah, I agree. He's menacing. He certainly flips a switch at the end when he lies to Miguel, threatening to break his action figure and then telling him everything's going to be okay before telling the guy to feed him to the Cobra pit. So yeah, he's evil. You feel it from him, and he's able to emote a couple of different things there throughout, including being smug and satisfied before he offs himself, or possibly offs himself. We don't know.
Absolutely. And then otherwise we do briefly have Cree Summer, as Max has mentioned that her conversation with Terry is kind of the framing device for our flashback. So we get a little bit of her being joking with Terry at the start, reminding him what a bad boyfriend he is, and all of that before moving on. So good to have her in there.
On a side note, I would just like to say I was very glad today when I was watching this show. An ad came across with I think it was for M&M's, and I heard Cree Summer's voice. So I was like, great, still getting voiceover work to this day. It absolutely, like, it when you hear it voice. Good for her. Just one of the most recognizable voices in voice acting. So good for Miss Summer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not a paid ad by M&M's, by the way.
No, absolutely. Although, again, very open to being bought by Hershey or Mars or whoever owns M&M's currently.
Correct.
Very open to doing paid propaganda for whatever, for big chocolate, if that's
the DMs are open, guys.
Yeah, let us know. Slide in there. But but elsewhere in the episode, speaking of our other recognizable names, we'll mention Kevin Conroy here as Bruce Wayne. And yeah, we've talked about how much Bruce is couched in these last couple seasons of Beyond, I feel like, for good reason. That's actually one of the other things they talked about in that featurette, was that they wanted to kind of resist doing too many legacy character episodes, even as they sort of got towards the end of the series. They didn't want to keep going back to that because they really wanted it to be Terry's show. which we accept. But then he, like I said, Kevin at least gets the one great scene today where he's just reading Terry the riot act about how could you endanger this kid and how could you be so flippant about it and all that. And you do get the sense of that Bruce still has that fire and that need to protect people, especially innocent children. A good job, even if it's really just that one scene that he gets to shine in.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of a scene where Kevin Conroy steals the scene here, and I think ultimately directly influenced my final score here to be a little bit higher than I probably would have given it, just from that impassionate, very seemingly authentic reading of the riot act to Terry in that sequence. So yeah, some really great stuff. You know, the original time of recording, we're coming up here on the anniversary of Mr. Conroy's passing, and it's just in the forefront of my head. It's like, man, he was, regardless of whatever role he was playing as Bruce, whether it's the young Bruce, whether it's the more seasoned Bruce, old Bruce, he could deliver such a unique yet just incredibly talented performance as whatever version of Bruce he was doing. And this little sequence there, like I said, I had my reasons for being frustrated that it wasn't followed up on, but that sequence itself may have actually kind of led to that, because with how passionate Bruce was and how great the performances that Kevin Conroy was, I was like, where's the follow up to this? Where he gets to eat his hat a little bit there. So yeah, I really loved that particular scene and feel like that you could just kind of highlight that as a, hey, put this on the highlight reel of, man, I could feel the disappointment and anger that Bruce Wayne has for Terry in that performance. So yeah, unsurprisingly, another great one for Mr. Conroy.
Absolutely. And then we'll get to before we get to our Batman, we'll mention here. Yeah, this is Sean Marquette as Miguel Diaz here. Not much in the way of DCAU, although he does play young Zeta apparently in one of the Zeta Project episodes. I'm not sure if we've talked about that one yet, but also, maybe more famously, would be the voice of the kid Mac on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which was a giant Cartoon Network show of the 2000s. So, and a show that our mother hated that I watched because of how high pitched and shrieky and yelling everyone was on that show, I think. But that's why you like it when you're a 10-year-old boy, unfortunately.
Of course, sure.
But yes, I think he does a solid job. Like, he's a little wooden, but again, it's always hard for me when it's an actual kid or teenager, and it's a guest star, so it's not like with Matthew Valencia or some of our other kid actors who are in for a whole season. So hard to be too harsh on him. I don't think he does like a tremendous job, but he does fine with what's asked of him. He's a kid. He's kind of emotionally kind of quiet and keeps to himself and just likes his action figures. And I think he does a good job playing that kind of like sheltered kid who's just being, thrust into this crazy scenario.
Yeah, I agree. He's fine. Like big bowl of okay is how I would describe it. Yeah, there are a couple of lines that maybe aren't so great, but for the most part, it feels like I mean, he's a kid and he's playing a kid, so that's all you can ask for, And not the worst child actor I've ever heard by far. And some of it is probably, some of the lines, he didn't have the greatest material given to him. So yeah, I think it's fine. I think that last sequence with him and Terry on the soccer field, honestly, is like the kind of the most interesting that he does, outside of maybe him describing that he's afraid of Batman on top of the burning building, I'd say. But yeah, a fine performance from our young actor there.
Absolutely. And then, we have Will Friedle as Batman / Terry McGinnis / one of the other Cobra soldiers, pulling triple duty himself, or double duty this week. A lot for him to do because he's narrating this flashback tale, and then also, we get a lot of him as Terry going back and forth with Max, and doing their banter, and him trying to kind of drive home the point of why it's important for him to keep this secret identity. And then on the other side, you have him being Batman and actually kind of switching between the voices, because he's doing the Batman voice and then he pulls off the mask to try to make Miguel trust him, and he kind of drops back into the regular Terry voice. So he's kind of juggling a lot as far as switching between his voices, and then also providing like the noir narration of what's going on for the flashbacks.
Yeah, I think it's a fine performance, as you mentioned. Having to do the narration portion isn't always easy. We talked about that also, how that was not necessarily something that the DCAU as a whole leaned into. It kind of stands out when it's done. So yeah, I mean, Mr. Friedle is a talented actor. He has this role for a reason. At this point, he's 3 seasons in, and he's pretty much hit his stride here. So, unsurprisingly, being able to read in a different form as opposed to kind of reading, being a narrator versus, having a conversation with somebody. Well, I'm sure it's different in how you deliver, in how you process, and maybe how you give your lines. There's no tell here for Mr. Friedle that there was, any difference to him, because I think it's a good performance for him this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So for all those reasons, I settled on a 5 out of 10 for voice acting. I don't think certainly nobody's bad. I think everybody does a solid job. Maybe Mr. Friedle being the strongest of our cast here, but just like I said, I think it's the actors maybe being let down by their material a little bit this week. Just wasn't a lot of chances for anyone to have a big standout moment in the voice acting for me.
Yeah, and I went. We'll have to check the archives and figure out if this has ever happened before, where we have had a 1 point difference in every one of our scores. But I ended up giving a 6 out of 10 for my voice acting, and the reason why is really, like I said, that Kevin Conroy scene of him just being so passionate and screaming at poor Terry about letting him down and revealing his secret identity. That scene just really, really blew me away. So, yeah, I went just 1 point higher with a 6 out of 10. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. So let's total up our scores, shall we? And as I mentioned, we're going to have a little bit of a difference here, despite us not vehemently disagreeing on really anything. But because we differed on every single category by a point, I ended up with a final score of 23 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, like I said, not it really doesn't feel like it's disagreement alarm worthy, other than that it's a 4 point difference due to our 1 point difference in each of the four categories. But yeah, I ended up with a slightly lower score of 19 out of 40.
All right.
So that's and as mentioned, we kind of spoiled it, or I kind of jumped the gun a little bit earlier. But yeah, rewatchability, big old skip for me.
Yeah, I think you could sit here and argue this as, oh, well, it's a Cobra episode, but it's detached from the other Cobra episodes. There's no mention of anything else that's ever happened before. You could argue, well, it's the finale, but as we already said multiple times, it's not really a finale. It just is the last episode that was aired for the show. The true finale, which we didn't really talk about, that they went back and kind of retroactively did for Beyond, is epilogue. So you really don't miss anything. And ironically, for a long time, many people may not have even known that this episode existed. We didn't see this episode. I think you mentioned we didn't see this episode till we got the DVDs. We didn't have cable TV. Probably didn't even know that this episode existed until the DVDs came out, and the Blu-rays came out, because that's before we were heavily on the internet and constantly in the know about certain things like this. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that this, despite all of those arguments that can be made, ultimately when we get down to it, this is a skip. All right, Liam, well, that begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the final new review of Batman Beyond. We have something special coming up in a couple weeks regarding Batman Beyond. So, again, this won't be the last time that we discuss Batman Beyond on the show, but it is the last new review. So, thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion, albeit one that maybe doesn't live up to the hype, so to speak. But regardless, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you love this episode. Maybe it does live up to the hype. Maybe you think that this episode is worthy of being the finale. Please tell us why we're wrong. Tweet at us at DCAU Review on Twitter X. Send us a DM on Instagram at DCAU Review, on both platforms. We're also on some of those other platform things that are kind of like Twitter, but not Twitter. So feel free to follow us on there at DCAU Review as well. You can also contact us there. But the best and most likely to get a response in the near future is to do so on Twitter X or Instagram. You can also leave a comment directly on the podcast episodes on Spotify if you listen there. If you listen on Apple, you can leave us a 5-star review there. Mention your feedback there if you want to. That's fine. If you follow us on either of those platforms, please subscribe to the podcast. Leave a 5-star review on either one. That helps us a lot. If you leave a blurb on the Apple Podcast site and we read it here on the air, you live in the United States and it's 5 stars, that's the qualifications, we will send you a little gift too just for doing so. So don't forget if you want to do that. And guess what? If you've left a review before, Apple lets you leave, I think, as many reviews as you want to. So if you want to revisit that, you haven't left a review in a while, you want a free gift just in time for the holidays, you live in the US, do it. You can also, of course, check out the show notes if you want to. I know sometimes, I think if you don't listen to us on Spotify, you might not be able to, I discovered, because I'm a Spotify guy, if you don't listen on Spotify, you may not be able to directly click on the links to support the podcast. So what I invite you to do is you can head over to Instagram, check out the link in our bio. You can also check out the stories that we have, the archived stories there at the top of our page. Or if you're on Twitter X, you can check out the link in our bio there. There's a link to our Buy Us a Coffee directly there, or just head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Support the podcast. If you become a super friend supporter, you get to ask us a question, just like Zach did this week. Shout out to Zach. Thanks for being a super friend supporter. Liam, what's Zach's question for us for this week?
Absolutely. So Zach's question for the last episode is as follows. Unmasked is the final episode of the original Batman Beyond series. I know it isn't really a finale, so my question is, forgetting about Return of the Joker and the JLU episode epilogue, what would be your perfect finale for this show?
Man, that is a good question.
Well, that's because I think, and I appreciate Zach leaving it kind of open-ended, because that to me means we can answer this 2 ways. One, we can just pick a different episode of this, of the series to be the finale.
Sure.
Or you can kind of create your own, what would be your final episode?
Man, that's a good question. Well, I think if we're going the latter and we're kind of creating our own story there, it's hard because we have to play in the sandbox with a canon, I assume, with epilogue. I know he said forget that, but he's saying that's disqualified from using it as the finale. So it's like, so you kind of have to play in the sandbox there. So maybe an episode that kind of connects to the Once and Future thing, where we get like a crossover type thing. I know Once and Future thing doesn't happen until several years later. Or hey, maybe just another Justice League crossover, I think would be fun. In some form or fashion there. I think them being one and done was kind of a disappointment on our end. So yeah, maybe something, even if it's just a single episode crossover with another hero. Heck, you know what? If we're completely fantasy booking, we finally find out what happened to Dick Grayson. That's the finale.
That's kind of where my head went. Like a Dick Grayson, a Selena Kyle, some other big character from the original animated series that we never got to see. what happened to them. I think that's on the docket. Famously, there was almost, as we said, if Return of the Joker had done better in video sales, there was plans for a second movie that would have involved Selena Kyle, and also maybe some of those elements ended up in epilogue. We'll talk about that one day, certainly in more detail. But I think maybe an introduction of an older Dick Grayson, or some kind of adventure that pulls another big supporting character back to Gotham to interact with Bruce and to meet Terry would definitely have been the way to go. If we did the former, if we just picked a different episode, I think it's probably out of the past because that does have like a certain finality to it. I think, even though I guess maybe if we go by the logic of it's Terry's show, not Bruce's, that's not a great choice for a finale. But the show kind of ending with Terry and Bruce escaping, and then Bruce kind of taking one last longing look at his youth with Talia before it fades to black is pretty picturesque. That's like the Cheers finale where you turn off the lights and that's where it glows, and that's where we end it. But
I think my counterpoint to that would be, I think the call works better if you're going with Terry's story, because you have him at that point, he's still following in the footsteps of Bruce, being a part-timer, not being a full member. You've expanded the world a little bit, or re-expanded the world, specifically Terry's world, to involve all of these other heroes, and kind of broaden things past the barriers of Gotham City at this point. So I think if you're going to go big and bombastic, you even kind of pressure studio execs, maybe, hey, look, this is a backdoor pilot if you guys want to ever do a bigger story here with a future Justice League. So, plus it's great because you have an actual Justice League show that's debuting, shortly thereafter, or that's in the works already, that's happening already. So let's just, use this show to kind of push that one. That would be my only counterpoint. But Out of the Past also, I think, is a fine choice.
Yeah, but great question from Zach. Like I said, I loved how open-ended it, because I felt like we got to attack it from a couple different ways, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Zach's always got great questions. I dare say though, Zach, that to date, that is your best question. I appreciate that. So regardless of whether or not you got your question asked this week, if you want to get the opportunity to get your question asked next week, join Zach and our other supporters. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and support the podcast today. Liam, as we mentioned, unfortunately, we have closed the book on Batman Beyond for now for new reviews. We have something coming up in a couple of weeks, though, that we'll talk about next week, at the end of next week's episode. But speaking of next week's episode, oh boy, when we stay in the future, that means that we have some Zeta Project reviews. And depending on your perspective or how much you like the Zeta Project, thankfully or not, we are winding down sort of the Zeta Project reviews here. We have a double feature of Zeta next week, just in time for a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. So be thankful that we're not reviewing more episodes at one time. Dare say that's a threat.
Absolutely, but yes, it will be your kind of show, Puke Face, next week, as we cover Eye of the Storm and Quality Time, the 8th and 9th episodes of the second and final season of the Zeta Project. We're closing in. The walls are closing in, but yes, 2 more episodes to talk about next week with Zeta and Ro and all the wacky things that they get up to in a season that I think at some point they weren't allowed to show him punching anyone anymore. So not that there was a lot of that in Zeta anyway, but I think they're fighting a tornado or something in one of those. So just as always, it will be a fascinating and probably a bit cathartic as we get a little of our we channel a lot of our otherwise docile personalities into our Zeta Rage reviews. So hopefully that'll be fun for our listeners and cathartic for us as well.
Can't wait. It will be a blast one way or the other. But until then, I'm Cal.
I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.